Right, back live with you tonight on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. In a recent opinion piece that he has put together, Professor William Gumede argues for a clear divide between party politics and state, including state-owned enterprises. The governance expert contends that appointing politicians to lead SOEs breaches that divide. Professor Gumede joins us now to give us more background into that article. Prof, good evening, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on. I looked at that piece and I read it over and over again. It just kind of took me back to what the president had said following the release of the full State Capture Commission of Inquiry report and some of the commitments that he made there towards the reforms at our SOEs. We'll get to them in a moment. But let's talk about why is there such a thirst within political parties, and not the ANC alone. I mean, it seems across. Now we are talking coalitions, for example, in local government, and how those parties there, as soon as they take charge of particular portfolios and oversight of particular portfolios, they want to exercise some degree of power over what we know as SOEs. Why is there such a thirst within political parties to exercise power over SOEs?
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me. Very happy to be speaking to you. I think the first thing is, to make it clear that it is very important in a democratic society that there is a division between the state and politics and party politics, and a division between a governing party and the state, and the two cannot be blurred and confused. So if the two are confused, we have a party state, and when we have a party state, there really isn't a democracy. So what we've seen the last couple of years, we've seen increasingly the appointment of politicians to the leadership of SOEs, either as chairs of boards or even board members, or either in some cases even as CEOs of state-owned companies. Now that, number one, what it does, it really breeds that divide, that wall that I talked about that we're supposed to have between politics and between the state. But secondly, most importantly, what it does, it really undermines accountability, it undermines efficiency, and it undermines the delivery of a state-owned entity, because normally what we get, these politicians that get appointed, they normally don't have the skill sets to run these companies. And although they don't have the skill sets when they arrive there as the head of these companies or running these companies, because they're politicians, they carry the political weight. Whatever they say is like the law. So even if they're totally wrong, if they are corrupt or self-interested, the rest of the board or the rest of the management will follow them, even if the management of the board may disagree. The non-politicians on the board and management disagree, because the politicians are so powerful. At the end, what then becomes the politicians who sit there make decisions not in the interest of the entity or in the interest of the customers, of the citizens, but in the interest often of the party or their own self-interest.
Yeah, not only do they come with wielding a lot of power, but they also come in with the party factional battles and bring them into these boards. But why have we allowed, for example, a committee like the deployment committee of the ANC operating within a political party to carry so much weight in terms of providing us names of candidates to be appointed as SOEs? For example, when you look now, there's a new board at Eskom. It was, again, not appointed via the process that we were told was going to be followed. There's a new board at the SABC. It went through a process of parliament, certainly, but there's a new board at SAA that did not follow the processes that we were told we were going to be followed. For example, the president said there was lack of compliance, transparency and accountability in the appointment of board members. And he said the process that will be followed now is a process of an independent panel which will appoint the appropriate people with the appropriate expertise. Why have we allowed that to kind of be put to the side and it continued to be business as usual?
I mean, it started off when the ANC came into power and the ANC decided, transformation of the state, transformation of state-owned entities is through that process, it will bring in Initially it would bring in blacks, it would bring in women into the leadership of state-owned entities and also the state. So, that obviously was a very reasonable strategy, the beginning of 1994. Now it went wrong when the ANC started deploying its own individuals to these positions. So if it was an open, on merit, any black person or any woman with a skill set, with a competence and were honest, and it was a transparent process that we all can see, and so on, it would have been totally different. Now the problem started when that deployment of cadres, and often the deployment of the cadres was often based on loyalty, giving someone a job because, the person has loyally served the ANC, or perhaps the person has ran a campaign for one of the leaders, you get your rewards, or they can't find any place for the person on the ANC's, electoral list. The person can't go to parliament, can't go to local government as a councillor or, provincial legislature. Then they find a person a job in a state-owned entity. Now that really is, which has really helped to undermine state-owned companies. That is why we have seen failure of state-owned companies, the corruption in state-owned companies, ineffectiveness. I mean, the large majority of state-owned companies have failed. We've got 850 plus state-owned companies. Perhaps only 10 or so of the state-owned companies, are working. So that's an extraordinary failure rate of our state-owned companies. And one reason why they have failed essentially has been because of appointing politicians, whether they are active politicians or whether they're non-active politicians. What we need to do, really, we have to get politicians out of the state, out of state-owned enterprises. We've even seen often the private sector have appointed politicians, often, former politicians. And we've seen the disaster even in private sector companies when they appoint politicians as the chairs of the companies. Because, the politicians, what they do is they bring baggage, they bring the factional political baggage into a company. They bring their toxic ways of engaging into a company, whether it's a private company or a state-owned company, and they really undermine the culture, the organizational culture of a company. And because they bring their networks, if their networks are corrupt, they bring the networks into a company. They bring the networks into the procurement cycle of a company, but also they make decisions from a political point of view and not from an efficiency point of view, not from a company point of view, not from a delivery point of view. And that absolutely undermines the functioning of any company, whether state-owned or private company. Yeah. But we've also seen now, some of the new political parties, the smaller political parties at local level, they seem to have adopted the ANC strategy of, when they want to deploy their own cadres into positions, particularly in coalition government. Say a small party gets a partnership in a coalition government at the city level or at a smaller municipal level. In return for being part of a coalition, what they often demand is that their cadres be appointed to the province, to the municipal state-owned companies or city state-owned companies.
Yeah. How do we bypass this? I mean, you mentioned that they should be completely taken out, but I mean, it's very difficult to say how do you completely take them out when the executive authority, for example, in the Department of Transport lies with the politician, or if you look at water and sanitation, it lies with the politician, any of the sectors. One of the suggestions is a process similar to how judges are appointed, which many are saying it's done very well, it's done independently. You've got the Judicial Service Commission full of some politicians, but there are experts there, people who are knowledgeable about the law, and they are the ones who assist in the appointment of the judiciary. Could something of that nature be instituted within the appointment of board members at SOEs?
I advised the 2009 presidential inquiry into state-owned companies, and I wrote the chapter in that report on the appointment of boards and executives of state-owned companies. And my proposal was, to the inquiry that the process must be taken firstly out of politics, and secondly also away from government. So we could set up independent. It could either be outside organization that does it one way, or alternatively, there could be a central organization or a unit even in the state, but this is a point, there's only non-state individuals preside over the appointment. So there are many, many ways. I mean, for example, if I take it outside, what people in other countries do, even what they would often do is create an independent interview panel and recruitment panel, which have nothing to do with the state, nothing to do with politics, and they will do the recruitment, they will do the interviews, and they will do the appointment. There's many, many ways we can skin the cat in terms of appointing executives and appointing board members. I mean, the most important thing is that a process has to be independent from the state, independent from parties, from governing parties.
Prof, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on tonight. Professor William Gumede, who's with the Wits University School of Governance.